Live.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ثم أما بعد. So we'll continue inshallah our discussion regarding the zakah or the zakatability on any investment in the stock market, in particular stocks, shares and bonds. First of all, what's the difference between a bond and a stock? As you see here in the slide, stocks and shares represent ownership of a certain part of the capital of a corporation. In other words, if I hold stocks for Walmart, for Walgreen, for CVS, for Microsoft, for Apple, it means that I am one of the owners of that company. Now, this is actually the stock or the share. What's the difference between a stock and share? Usually, we use the term stock as as opposed to bonds, as opposed to bonds. Bond actually is an interest-bearing loan. When you hold a bond, it means that you have or you are lending the federal government certain amount of money in which the government is committed to paying you back the principal and the interest. So when we say stocks, it is actually the stocks actually is to make it different from bonds. But when we say stocks and shares, okay, there is of course like a lot of similarities between the two. Shares actually are the stocks who belong to a certain company. So you hold like shares of Walmart, shares of Microsoft, right? But when you want to make those shares distinct from bonds, we do not say shares, we say stocks. Okay. So one more time, stocks actually represent ownership of a certain part of the capital of a corporation. Once you hold the stock, it means that you are one of the owners of that particular company. Of course, like trading in stocks is permissible as long as the core business of that particular company is permissible, and of course, as long as you know uh, 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 the haram or the prohibited components are to the minimum. I'm not here to discuss the permissibility of certain industries or certain stocks. I'm just shedding some light that sometimes a certain stock might belong, let's say, for example, to Apple, right? Okay. Well, the core business of Apple or Microsoft is a permissible one, right? It's a technology and computers and on and on. However, you might not know that a certain or that certain stock belongs to Apple might have a good portion of haram involved in it. That haram might be coming from haram investment or haram assets or high debt asset ratio, okay, in which those three different components might turn the whole stock not to be a permissible one. So I just want to bring this to your attention. But as I said, this is not our topic for the day. We're here to discuss the zakatability of the stocks and the shares. Okay. Bonds are certificates of an interest-bearing loan borrowed by the government. It is prohibited to trade in bonds. Period. Bottom line. Holding a bond actually is not permissible to start with. Now, those who hold stocks, okay, or shares, if you wish, have like two different practices. Some people are happy with the dividend that they make. They are not interested in just speculating, trading, buying and selling, and watching the Yahoo stocks and the different indexes. Whenever the price of stocks goes up, they sell. Whenever the price goes down, they buy. They are not into that business. They are just having like a stable investment in the stock market, and they generate some profit called dividend in the stock market, and that's it. Okay? They might trade every now and then, but this is not their mainstream practice. This is not their mainstream practice. Their mainstream practice is just to sleep on those stocks and to generate some fund. As simple as that. If that is the case, if that is the case, then the zakatable part is the dividend only. The zakatable part is the dividend only, because this particular scenario is identical actually to the individual who has a taxi cab, for example. The vehicle itself that he has is not for sale, right? But he makes money. Or the one who has some rental properties, some apartments, apartments or condos or houses for rent, right? uh, those properties are not for sale, but he makes money out of renting them, out of leasing them, and that leased revenue is the zakatable part. If you have rental property, okay, it is the exact concept when it comes to stocks not for sale or not for trading purposes in the stock market. Okay, in this very particular scenario, we call those stocks as exploited assets, المستغلات. So the product itself is not for sale, but the product itself makes money. So the money generated out of holding that property, the money generated is the catable, but the product itself or the asset itself is not zakatable. Okay. In this case, stocks that you have are not zakatable because they are not for sale. They are not urudu tijar. What the zakatable part is the profit that you make or the dividend that you make out of holding those stocks. Now, the other scenario, which is completely the opposite, is when you are very active in the market and your common practice is to keep like buying and selling and trading and speculating, and you just every now and then you buy and sell. If that is the case, then everything that you have in your account, whether dividend, whether the surface value of the account that you have in the stock market, everything actually is zakatable. Of course, not 100%, because if you decide to liquidate that account, you will be maybe charged, certain charges, could be service fees, could be whatever, interest, processing fees, tax, maybe to the government, whatever the expense might be. You take everything into consideration. We deduct all these expenses, and the net amount actually is the zakatable part. You might say, why the ruling here is different from 401k? Why the rule here is different from 401k and other retirement accounts? That's a very good question. In 401k, 401k actually is a very restricted account. It's not accessible in full. You do not have the authority of just getting all what you want with no consequences, right? But I'm talking about accounts other than retirement accounts where you do have like full access. For example, if you have a simple investment account, or you have an account in a mutual fund company, have an account with a brokerage called brokerage account, have 529 for the education of your kids. Okay, to be honest with you all, in the real life, it's really hard to believe that someone is not trading in the stock market. Okay, because if you do not do it yourself, somebody else is doing it on your behalf. If you have a brokerage account, well, the broker actually is trading and making money on your behalf. If you have 529, I mean, you cannot manage your 529 by yourself. Somebody else, actually, a wealth manager or a financial advisor or investment company, actually is taking over that account and trading in the stock market on your behalf. They want to make money. So again, in the real life, it's really hard to believe that someone is just having stocks and sleeping on those stocks without trading and speculating. However, if it did happen, if that is proven that a certain account actually is a stagnant account, okay, a steady account, it's not for trading purposes on a regular basis. Even if you trade 2 or 3 times a year, no big deal. If that is proven, then you pay zakah on the dividend only and not on everything that you have. Otherwise, which is most probably it is the case that everything actually is for trading purposes in your investment in the stock market, then you need to pay zakah on everything, the stocks and the dividend. And this is, by the way, regardless of whether you capitalize the dividend, like put the dividend back into the account and buy more financial instruments, or otherwise you decide to withdraw that money, just put it in your pocket and take it home, as they say. It doesn't make any difference. Everything actually that you generated is zakatable, and you pay zakat based on 2.5%. If you want to go with the book, if you are not that interested in paying more than zakat al-mal, then you can definitely deduct, I would say, 10 to 15%, what's called usulun thabita, the fixed assets, because those stocks that you hold, who belong to Microsoft, who belong to Walmart, they do not represent commodities, merchandise, and goods 100%. They represent Walmart. Walmart actually is a retail store. They do have a lot of fixtures and fixed assets. They have properties, they have parking lot, they have softwares, they have hardwares, they have furniture, they have surveillance cameras, they have a lot of things that are not for sale, right? So those fixed assets might represent 10 to 15, I would say, percent of the value of the stock. You can put them aside if you are not interested, to pay more than zakat al-mal, and the rest actually is to be charged zakat al-mal based on 2.5% zakat rate. So we have exploited assets, as you see here, versus trading assets. Trading assets, you pay zakat on everything. Exploited assets, you pay zakat only on the dividend or the profit. Okay. Something else. If the company pays zakah on all shares, that might be the case in some, in some Muslim countries, like back in Saudi Arabia when I was there. I got to know for a fact that there is like a certain government department who takes care of charging companies and corporations zakat al-mal. If that is proven that a certain company that you hold its stocks, right, has been charged zakat al-mal, then those stocks that belong to that particular company are zakat exempt. Why? Because zakat has been charged already, right? And Prophet ﷺ said, "La thanya fi sadaqa." There is no duplication in taxation. If the whole company, the whole corporation has been charged zakat al-mal, it means that your stocks in that particular company have been charged zakat al-mal, as well. You do not have to pay it back because you have been charged already. Okay. When it comes to bonds, as I said, holding a bond is not an option to start with. Holding a bond is not an option to start with, because bond actually is an interest bearing loan. Okay, sometimes they call it T bill, sometimes they call T treasure. I mean, whatever they call it, it is a bond. It's a straightforward haram transaction where you lend the federal government certain amount of money, and the government guarantees your principal and your profit. Well, when your profit is guaranteed, that's an interest bearing transaction that you should stay away from it, right? Interest bearing loans, okay, there is a no zakah due on the generated interest. That's absolutely correct, because that interest is a pure haram money. It's a pure prohibited money that you generated. Okay, and from a Sharia perspective, if the money is purely haram, then paying 2.5% will not purify, will not get rid of the haram, status of the money. Whatever is haram is still haram. Whatever is haram is still haram. So the profit or the interest that you make is to be disposed in full. If you want to clear your record with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, stay away from that interest. Just get rid of it. And whenever or upon the maturity of the bond, whenever you receive your principal and your interest, get rid of the interest and keep the principal, because it's still a halal one. So the principal is halal, thus the principal is zakatable. Principal is zakatable. Interest is haram, thus interest is not zakatable. Rather, you have to pay not 2.5%, no, you need to pay 100%. Everything that we have, okay, you have received as an interest is to be disposed in full, because this is the only way where you can just clear your record with your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not to bear the sin of dealing with interest. Zakat al-diyun, loans zakat. That's that's a category or sub-subject, if you wish, in which there is nothing, literally nothing, could be attributed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in this regard. Prophet ﷺ did not give us any instruction whatsoever on how to handle the loans. Someone, okay, ABC gave XYZ $10,000 loan. Okay, just imagine. There is no way that ABC, the creditor or the lender, and and the borrower, both of them have to pay zakat, because we are talking about only one lump sum of $10,000. And if we ask the lender and the borrower both to pay zakat, it means that those $10,000 have been charged zakat al twice. And this is in a very clear contradiction with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, لا ثنية في الصدقة, no duplication in taxation. So there is no way to charge both of them, right? As well as there is no way to excuse both of them. We cannot say, well, the lender does not have the money cash in his hand, thus he is zakah exempt. As well as the borrower actually does not own the money. Yes, I mean he possesses the money, he owns the money, but the money actually is not his. He has to pay it back. So he is excused. Well, if you go with this approach, you're gonna end up having $10,000 in a certain society that are zakah exempt, which is impossible. I mean, this is incorrect. Okay, those $10,000 have to be charged zakatul mal. Okay, so if charging both parties, lender and borrower, is not correct, waiving or excusing both parties, lender and borrower, is not an option. Well, we ended up having only and only that one of them has to pay zakat al-mal. It's either or. It's either the lender or otherwise the borrower. Is there anything that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in this regard? The answer is no. And that's why even the companions of the Prophet ﷺ had a variety of opinions regarding zakatul dain. Who is supposed to pay zakah on loans or on debts? Okay, and the tabi'in, like the second generation, and the founders of the four different madhahib, even the contemporary, the current fiqh councils nowadays are still in a kind of like disagreement, or they do have like a variety of opinions regarding zakatul mal. Now, to my knowledge, the one who has to pay zakah is the borrower and not the lender. And this is actually the Shafi'i school of thought. This is the Shafi'i school of thought. You may ask why the borrower has to pay money, because the money is not his. Well, the money is his. The money is his. Well, first of all, why the lender does not have to pay zakah? Because he does not possess the money. Okay, the money is not accessible to him. Yes, I mean he is the legal owner of that money. That's why the borrower has to pay him back. But in the real life, he does not have an access to that money. Thus, cannot invest that money. And if you think about the philosophy and the wisdom behind the zakah being charged once a year, it is actually for the fact that you will be having enough breather, enough time to make investment, to make money, to make some profit, and to pay off the zakah, the 2.5% from the money that you make from the profit, right? Well, if you do not have that money available, accessible, even if you are the legal owner of the money, if you do not have that money accessible to you, how can you make profit? How can you set off the 2.5% zakah? You cannot, right? So we ended up having only one individual who has to pay zakah on that amount, which is the borrower. Again, this is the school of thought or the madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i, and actually I do believe that this opinion is very, very valid one. Okay, when we say that the borrower is the one who is supposed to pay zakah, it means that as long as he is still having the money and the money is staying in his possession for one complete year. Someone took $10,000 from me, okay, and his zakat due date is the month of Ramadan. He took that money from me this year. Okay, he asked me for $10,000 to pay the tuition fees of his kids. Okay, to pay the rent and to do some maintenance for his house or his apartment, and I gave him $10,000. After receiving the money, after taking the money from me, he changed his mind. He said, "You know what? I'm gonna just buy a used car with that $10,000." Now I cannot stop him. I cannot stop him as a lender. I cannot stop him. Although, like when he approached me to start with, he was asking for money to pay the rent, right? Or to pay the tuition fees of his kids. But once receiving the money actually is his. If that individual, if that borrower, kept those $10,000 in his possession for the next week until the next year, I'm sorry, not next week, until the next year, then definitely he has to pay zakah on it. If that loan is due on the month of Ramadan. I gave him the money for 1 year. Okay. If that money is still available in his hand until next year, and that money is due, then whenever I receive the money, I, as a creditor, as a lender, I have to pay the counter. Okay. But if he did not pay me while the money actually is still in his possession, then he has to pay the counter. Okay. He has to pay the counter. What if the borrower took the money? Sorry, what if the borrower took the money and spent the money? Well, if there is no money, if there is no money, then there is no zakah. Then there is no zakah. Uh, Other opinions in this regard is that lender has to pay zakah, creditor or lender has to pay zakah as long as he is positive that the borrower is solvent, like in a good, like well off in a good financial position, and the money is almost guaranteed. They said, well, if the money is almost guaranteed, then you have to pay. Then the lender actually has to pay zakah on it. With all due respect, I disagree with this opinion because one of the conditions for the zakatability. One of the conditions for the zakatability of the money is al mulku tam raqabatan wa yadan, like full possession, full ownership, as well as full access. Okay, full access. Yes, again, legally speaking, the lender is the owner of the money, and that's why the borrower has to pay him back, right? But that lender does not have mulkun tam. It's not a full ownership. Okay, he owns the money technically, but he does not have an access to it. He does not have an access to it, and thus he is excused from paying zakat al-mal. Wallahu a'lam. Mortgage and car loan and other payments. Okay, whatever is due in the zakat due date. Say that you pay your zakah in the month of Ramadan. In that particular month, you have $2,000 mortgage payment to the mortgage company, another $500 for the car, another $250 for the appliances, another $250 for the furniture, and on and on. Whatever you have, the due, okay, whatever is payable, okay, due, and that particular month is deductible. Whatever is payable, whatever is due, payable is deductible. If you ended up having $25,000 net amount after deducting your expenses and whatever, and you still found out that, oh, I have to pay, the car and the mortgage company and the appliances and the furniture, another $3,000. Well, you need to pay zakah. You need to put those $3,000 aside and pay them immediately, and you make your zakah. In our example, on only $22,000. Why? Because all these different payments are deductible. Now, this is actually regardless whether that transaction, okay, that resulted on a monthly payment is a permissible or impermissible one. Whether it is haram or halal, it doesn't make any difference. Okay, mortgaging a house is not permissible. Mortgaging a house is not permissible. You are not supposed to buy house via traditional mortgage process, because when you mortgage a house, you borrow money with interest. As simple as that. Now, the fact that mortgaging a house is not permissible does not mean that if someone gets involved in that prohibited transaction and he or she is owing the mortgage company $2,000 in the month of Ramadan, that he cannot deduct those $2,000 because the transaction of mortgaging a house is prohibited. This is actually incorrect. Even if the deal is a prohibited one, as long as it resulted in a certain payment and that payment is due in the month of Ramadan, then it is deductible. Then it is deductible. So there is no connection between the permissibility of the transaction and the deductibility of the amount. Everything due, whether haram transaction or halal transaction, is still actually to be deducted from the pool of money that you have. Determining the value of assets. This is actually a long topic, so I would rather just put it on hold for now and just continue with you, inshallah, next week, next Tuesday. I'll be talking to you about how to determine the value of assets, especially if you are a merchant, for example, or you are a business, you're a person, entrepreneur that has like certain amount of properties or commodities or merchandise, how to calculate the value, how to determine the value of the assets that you have. That inshallah will be our topic for next week. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.